Welcome to Forum 360. I'm Sally Henning. It was just a short time ago when I was able to attend a function where the federal court judges were talking about new developments, and I was overwhelmed to hear our guests speaking at that conference. And for our audience, it's important to know that public perceptions of the role of the government, especially the judiciary, has been the subject of a lot of discussion. And the need now for direct, unvarnished communications about the court has never been greater. Accordingly, we are honored, we're delighted to present an unedited, live-to-tape conversation with a major figure in Northeast Ohio, U.S. Magistrate Judge for the Northern District of Ohio, the Honorable Thomas M. Parker. Mr. Parker, welcome to Forum 360.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And let me tell the audience a little bit about your tremendous background. Before this, Judge Parker was a judge of the Summit County Court of Common Pleas in Akron, Ohio, and he grew up in this Cleveland area, graduating from Shaker Heights High School. He received his undergraduate degree from Miami University of Oxford, Ohio, and his law degree from Case Western Reserve University. After graduation, Judge Parker joined the Akron, Ohio firm of Redsel and Andrus, and about 15 years later, helped form Parker, Levy, Hanna, and Resnick before going on the Common Pleas Court bench in 2009. And in private practice, Judge Parker was involved in civil cases, product liability, medical device case, toxic tort, commercial and business litigation, all the little stuff. But during the last 3 years of his private practice career, he took on the defense of indigents in criminal cases. Judge Parker is a graduate of Leadership Akron, a fellow of the Akron Bar Foundation, a member of the John M. Manis Inn of Court in Cleveland, and an emeritus member of the Charles Scanlon Sam Bell Inn of Court in Akron. And he also previously served on the Akron Board of Education. He currently serves as a board member of the Northern District of Ohio chapter of the Federal Bar Association, and more importantly, he serves on its diversity committee. And he's a member of the Federal Magistrate Judges Association and also serves on its diversity committee. He has volunteered for many things, including senior care facilities and the Small Business Council of the Akron Regional Development Board, the Akron Area YMCA, and various other organizations that are too numerous to mention. He's married to Melissa Parker and the father of 6, and they have 5 granddaughters. Your Honor, we are honored that in your spare time, you have come on to Forum 360.
Again, I'm very thankful to be here.
Well, thank you. So first of all, could you explain to our audience, set the table a little bit, what is the difference between federal and state court?
That's actually a great question, Sally, because in my experience working as a judge, I have found that while everybody knows about courts and going to court or perhaps serving on a jury, it's easy to get lost in the haze of the different levels. So we have 2 parallel systems in the United States. Every state has its own court system, and there is a federal court system that serves obviously across the United States. At the top of the federal system sits the United States Supreme Court, and then we have federal courts of appeals. But in Ohio, we have a Supreme Court, courts of appeals, and trial courts. And both systems run in parallel. Both deal with similar topics, criminal law in both, civil law in both, and citizens will interact with us by coming on a federal jury or a state jury. So we deal with a lot of everything.
Well, tell us a little bit about how you feel about your role on the bench and being able to be a judge, a magistrate judge. How not just what you do, but how you feel about it.
Well, it's the greatest honor I've had in my career. I had been in private practice for about 30 years when I first came to the bench, and the opportunity to go to the courthouse every day and have a chance to preside over cases involving the lives of fellow citizens and businesses and so forth, it's just the greatest privilege I've had. There hasn't been one day, literally not one day, that I have felt like this is some kind of a burden, because it's an ever-changing opportunity to learn, to try to understand where people are coming from, what needs they bring to the court, how the law affects those needs, and to uphold the law that our legislatures have adopted both federally and on the state side. So it's a tremendous privilege, and I love the opportunity.
Well, what people, what activities, experiences have helped you to prepare for this august responsibility?
The easy answer is every single thing I've done in my entire life has prepared me for it. Obviously, working in private practice as a lawyer, being a trial attorney that would go to court and try a case to a jury, that prepared me. But being a father prepared me. Being a husband, being a son, or somebody who has to abide by the law as a citizen, everything prepares you, because when you work as a judge, you're called upon to understand the law and apply the law, but it's not done in a vacuum. We do it with real people who come to court with tremendous needs. And so what I try to do is to try to apply the understandings I've gained over my lifetime to not just do the job of being a judge, but to help people understand what we're doing while we do it.
Before you went on the federal bench, you were a Summit County Common Pleas Court judge.
Yes.
What were some of the memorable challenges that you've had so far, either in Summit County Court or otherwise, that helped prepare? I understand you had a capital murder trial that you presided, maybe more than one.
I had one that went to trial. The challenge you face when you start to work as a judge is that you have to change your whole perspective. As a lawyer, you go to court to advocate for your client. As a judge, you're not advocating for one side of the case or the other. You are advocating for the law and for our system of justice.
Let me interrupt you. Could you explain to our audience what a capital murder case is as opposed to any other murder case? Excuse me, I'm sorry.
When somebody is charged with what's known as a capital offense, they face the potential for a death sentence. A traditional murder case in Ohio exposes somebody to the potential for life in prison with the opportunity for parole or not parole. But when somebody commits certain kinds of offenses and when the prosecution can prove certain additional factors, then the defendant faces the potential for a death sentence. So when we refer to a capital murder case, it's one where the defendant faces that risk.
That must have been quite an experience.
It was a life-changing experience. I remember the case so well. I don't know that we need to get into the details of the case, but one of the things I remember is that we've got the family of the defendant in the courtroom, and we've got the family of the victims in the courtroom. There was more than one person who was killed. And in that instance, the family of the victims, some of them thought the death sentence should be imposed, and some thought that the defendant, if convicted, should be sent to prison for life. And then you had the family of the defendant himself. So it was an extremely challenging case. Every judge I know would tell you very quickly that the last kind of case they want to preside over is a capital murder case, because it's so challenging to the community, to the participants involved, to the members of the jury, but also to the judge. It takes a tremendous emotional toll on everyone.
As you look back, what are some of the most exciting achievements that you have, or initiatives or developments for the court?
Well, we've been able to do many things over the years. One that I am involved with now in the federal court is as one of our reentry court judges in Cleveland. So state courts and federal courts are now operating what are known as reentry programs.
What is a reentry program, sir?
Well, the whole purpose of reentry is to recognize the fact that people who have been sent to prison, unless it's a life sentence, they're coming back to the community. And oftentimes they come back with so many limitations. We would think this individual has paid his debt to society, her debt to society, and they should just reintegrate back in, get a job, go on with life. It's not that easy.
It must be very difficult.
Well, some don't even have a driver's license, a place to stay. Perhaps they've lost family support. So the purpose of reentry court is to recognize those needs and set up a more close supervision, if you will, so that when the individual comes back to the community, we can provide them with perhaps mental health counseling or drug treatment or assistance in getting a job, just basic things that most of us take for granted. The statistics show that when people have that kind of extra assistance, their opportunity to come back into our community and not be back in the criminal justice system increases dramatically. And we've had the opportunity to see, as reentry court judges, the direct impact on particular people that we got to know. It's tremendously exciting. And we have alternative courts like that throughout Ohio and in the federal courts, diversion courts, drug courts, mental health courts, some veteran courts. It's a recognition that we're not just stamping out people that go through the system and then casting them aside. We're trying to deal with the needs of the offenders and the victims to make sure the system is just for everyone.
How did you get involved in this?
In reentry court?
Yeah.
Well, I was asked by our chief judge, so
That'll do it.
we do what the chief judge asks us to do. But I had expressed an interest in it. I just, if you're on the judge's side of the bench and you have the opportunity to deal with the person who is the accused, they're sitting about as far away or standing about as far away as I am from you. So you look the people in the eye, you get a chance to know them at least a little bit. You recognize the value of the person as a person. And if you've got any kind of humanity at all, you can't help but wonder, what will this person do when they're done with the system? And how can we try to help them not commit another offense, not end up back in court? That protects our community, but it also helps the person who's the offender.
Totally different perspective.
Completely different. The thing that I found to be, you asked about interesting challenges. When I first took the bench, I don't think anything can prepare you for the awesome responsibility of dispensing justice, determining sentences in criminal cases, for example, because oftentimes you've got so many competing interests. Family members of the victim are almost always advocating for maximum sentences. Family members of the defendant are asking for leniency and mercy. The law gives the judge a great deal of discretion. And the idea that I could have the authority to determine whether this person got put on probation or went to the penitentiary, it's an awesome responsibility. So that is something that I've taken quite seriously. I don't think there's anything that can really prepare you for that until you've actually had to do it.
You're tuned into Forum 360. I'm Sally Henning, our very special guest today, the Honorable Thomas Parker, Magistrate Judge of the Northern District of Ohio Federal Court, talking about the awesome responsibility of being federal magistrate and being in the federal court. You talked about some of the initiatives the court. I have to ask you about the one that actually stimulated our invitation to you to appear, and that was the court's initiative on racial sensitivity. Could you talk about that a lot, and perhaps your own journey?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I don't know that the U.S. District Court has a particular initiative, but what we have done is that individual members of the Federal Bar Association, other judicial groups that you've mentioned, are involved in different programs, and I'm, as you said, I'm a member of the diversity committee of the Federal Bar Association, and we wanted to just promote conversation, try to promote understanding. We conducted an interview, or back and forth kind of discussion between our former Chief Judge Solomon Oliver and myself, just to talk, one man to another, one judge to another, one public figure to another, about where we were coming from in our community, in the judicial system, on issues of race. So I had felt very strongly about this topic. I felt that way for many, many years, but my interest...
Your personal journey. My
personal journey really, I would say, kicked off with a great deal of intensity when I was at a church service, and our pastor asked us, as a part of our Black History Month celebration, to read a book. It was called The Color of Compromise by an author named Jamar Tisby. And it traced the history of race in the Christian church in the United States. The thing that really struck me about that was the facts, the events, the people that were involved in documented historical events that had really led to the separation of churches over the years. I had often wondered as a young man, why is it that we have what you might call predominantly white or predominantly black churches? Why is that? Is it a matter of preference? Is it just some historical fact? And if you read a book like that, you come to realize it was not initially a matter of preference. It was a matter of preclusion. Mm-hmm. Certain people were not permitted to go to church with one another, even though they may have wanted to. Well, I read the book, and I just found it to be a fascinating, I would say, eye-opening experience. It led me to start reading more things. And I remember one author in one of the books challenging the reader, asking specifically, how much of your time do you spend reading works by authors who do not look like you? And quite frankly, I had to admit to myself, not much. And so I began a program of trying to gather as much information as I could, as many books as I could.
For your home library? Just
so that I could begin to gain an understanding. You know, we're in such a unique place in our country right now on this topic. There is so much division on the topic, so much heat, and it seems like not that much light. And I felt that the least I could do was to educate myself about historical facts in the United States. And I think everyone owes it to himself or herself to take that journey and not to do it because someone is preaching to you or hitting you over the head, but just so you'll know. I want to know where people are coming from who don't look like me or may not have shared the journey that I've had in my life. Why do you feel the way you do? And I've had an opportunity to read quite a bit. And now when Judge Oliver and I shared that program, we had a pretty frank discussion.
It was an excellent program.
And well, thank you. It was just, there was a lot of positive feedback, and you know, my encouragement to anyone is to take that journey for yourself. Get some materials that perhaps you're not familiar with. Read, learn.
You remind me, I once had a series of training sessions where I showed 100 executives a picture of a person of one race standing, and then showed them a picture of another person of a different race standing, and asked the 100 what were they doing. And for the person who was white, they said they're standing, and the person who was black, they said they're goofing off. And it's an interesting thing that they didn't recognize. So the purpose of it was to train them to open up the blinders and do comparative data analysis. But it's interesting that there's so much involved in this, it's sometimes unconscious.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, the thing that my reading has really opened my eyes about is the historical policies that existed in our country, things like redlining. Many people have heard about redlining as far as real estate purchases are concerned. It helped me as a judge to read about that, to read, you know, why it is that certain people could purchase a house in this part of town but not that part of town, or could get a mortgage here but not there, and to realize the extent to which federal policy was involved in that. So this was not just a private activity. This was a combination of private and governmental activity. And it explains a lot about why our communities are as separate as they are and have been for years. So again, I would encourage people to read, to learn. There's so much talk now, and if people would spend a portion of their time trying to gain some background information and understanding for themselves, they'll be better able to contribute to the discussion in a way that promotes understanding and unity rather than just anger.
So have any initiatives or activities evolved with respect to diversity in the court?
Well, there are actually. I was just reading an email this morning. There's as a member of the Federal Magistrate Judges Association, I learned about a program called Roadway to the court. And the purpose of that program is to expose what it is that a magistrate judge does, or say a bankruptcy judge does, so that we can teach young people in America, if you have any interest in working in this kind of a career, here are some of the things you would need to do in order to prepare yourself so that you could be considered. We want to have the bench be as open to anyone who wants to participate as they can. So we have the best men and women to serve as judges in the United States that we possibly can.
Well, speaking of being open, the bench being open, let's talk about COVID-19.
Do we have to?
How is this currently impacting the federal criminal justice system and the federal courts? It has to. Well, has to have an effect.
It has had an effect. When Congress passed the CARES Act in 2020, most people don't realize, they put a provision in there specifically to allow federal courts to conduct proceedings by video conferencing. We did not have that authority. And since March of 2020, we've done almost all of our hearings by video. And it's actually proven to be fairly efficient.
Sure.
In certain ways. In other ways, it's not efficient at all because defense counsel can't as readily meet with their clients to prepare for court. But we're doing that. We've been doing it for about 2 years now. We went through long periods of time where we could not conduct jury trials, but we're now back with jury trials, and we've got all sorts of extra steps in place, extra procedures in place to protect the health and safety of all the participants, including the members of the jury. So the business of the courts is going on, and I think we're moving the cases as efficiently almost as ever. The hope is that by the end of this year, I'm speaking for myself, not for our judges. The hope is that by the end of the year, we'll be back to full-time in-person operations.
Is that your forecast or your hope?
Well, Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court just last week lifted their mask mandate. I predict that our court will do that soon as well. And we already have the right to bring people into the courthouse to conduct proceedings. So I would predict, I'll be bold, by the end of the year we'll be, unless we have a new variant, we'll be running as we did in the past.
So other than the things you talked about, what are some of the other interesting events or challenges that you've had with the court?
I would say every day is a challenge. One of the challenges I've had as serving as a federal magistrate judge is just the breadth of federal law. I remember...
changes every day.
It changes every day, but as you know, there is so much more federal law than there is state law. The entire Ohio Revised Code would fit on one bookcase if you're looking at the actual books. The United States Code for containing federal law, and more importantly, the Code of Federal Regulations, would involve an entire wall of books. So the great challenge for me, and the interesting thing for me, is to begin to work on cases that involve issues that I had no experience with whatsoever. So as a judge, people assume you understand all these principles, but much of the time we spend learning, teaching ourselves. It's a great challenge.
Keeping up with the challenges.
Keeping up with the challenges. And I'm fortunate, I've got law clerks that work with me and as a part of my staff, and they're always researching, writing, assisting the court. It's a great challenge.
Well, speaking of your law clerks and other young people, what advice might you have for a young person who's interested in pursuing a career, either as a law clerk or in law at a future time, who wants to set a path for themselves to be involved in the federal court? What advice might you have for young people?
Well, the best thing to do is to stay in school, work hard, take school seriously, even in high school, junior high. Put yourself in the best position you can be in to be able to go on to college. Some people think, oh, I can't do 4 years of college and 3 years of law school. It just seems too big. But the reality is, if you finished all that up by the time you're 25, you've got an entire career ahead of you. So get good grades, get into a good school, be broad-minded. in what you study. There's no one particular area of study that you ought to focus on in order to be a lawyer. So people come to law from music, from chemistry, from political science, all sorts of different areas. Just be a good student, be curious-minded. And when you get into undergraduate school, you can participate in mock trial programs. You can work as an extern in the court. We have externs in every year. And
What's an extern?
an extern is somebody who is in undergraduate school or law school, and they come in and work as a kind of law clerk. We'll have them do research, assist with writing, sit in on court proceedings to try to get an understanding of what it's like to actually work in the courthouse.
Oh, I'm ready. You've been tuned into Forum 360. We're honored to have today his honor, Thomas Parker, the magistrate judge for the Northern District of Ohio. On behalf of Forum 360, we thank you again, Judge Parker, for being here. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.